type 2 diabetes. Why is Alzheimer's disease called type 3 diabetes? So type 2 diabetes is a lack of function of insulin. Your insulin isn't working. Basically, you've become insensitive to insulin, likely from diet. And so when we eat a diet that's high in refined sugar, that spikes our insulin, spikes our blood glucose levels, and this often causes weight gain and inflammation. And these spiking of insulin and glucose, it starts to dull our insulin response. And eventually, our cells become resistant to the insulin response. Our pancreas will secrete insulin when we eat food. And our cells say, no, we're not. Basically, insulin causes the cells to uptake sugar. It's very important. And our cells will say, no, we don't want any more sugar, or they ignore the response, or whatever. So they become insensitive to the insulin response.
Good morning and welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and this is the podcast dedicating to recalibrating your health every day. My goal is to help you wake up each day energized by addressing root causes and giving you new approaches to preventive health. The more we know about integrative health, the more empowered we are in building the vibrant health we want.
Okay, welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I absolutely love having you on. This is Dr. Robert Love. He is a colleague of mine who I have deep respect for. We've had this wonderful working relationship for over a year now, where I learned so much from you. Like, I love all your TikToks, your Instagram posts. I get nuggets of wisdom on Alzheimer's and brain health and all the different ways we can support our body and prevent a lot of these diseases that are coming down the pipeline for so many. So, Dr. Robert Love, will you introduce yourself? Will you share your story? Will you share what led you to studying this topic in so much detail?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Shivani. It's been an honor becoming friends with you over the last year, seeing you at conferences and then working with you. It's such an honor. And I love what you do. And I've been talking about the power of what you do for years before I met you of curcumin. And we'll get into all why I like curcumin so much. So my name is Robert Love. I'm a neuroscientist, and I specialize in helping people prevent Alzheimer's disease with science. About 5 years ago, I visited my parents in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I noticed that their memory was not very good. I was actually there to help my mother as she recovered from back surgery. And neither her or my father, their brains, they didn't seem good. And so at the time, I was working with ADHD. I was coaching parents and teens with ADHD to try to help them manage their ADHD symptoms. I have ADHD, and that's what I thought my career in the field would be. And looking at my parents, I got really concerned, and I started looking at their food. And I just noticed there was a lot of sugar. I said, Mom and Dad, you've really got to get rid of the sugar. This is doing bad things for your brain. Like, well, how do you know? I said, well, I think it is. Let me do the research. So I started getting really into the Alzheimer's prevention research. I found out so much. And at that point, I switched my focus from ADHD to Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's prevention, because I thought, I don't want my parents getting Alzheimer's. I had 2 grandparents with dementia. One had Alzheimer's disease, and one had dementia unspecified that was likely from exposure to dry cleaning chemicals. And I knew I didn't want my parents to share the same fate. So I switched my focus then. I actually started my business kind of in my parents' house, not technically their garage, it was actually their kitchen. My first vision was to help end Alzheimer's disease with healthy chocolate. And so I made an amazing chocolate that was ketogenic friendly. It was sweetened with something called allulose. This was 5 years ago. Now I had to buy allulose in these 50-gallon or 50, massive drums, these 50-pound bags. Now you can buy it at Costco. So it's a ketogenic friendly sweetener. Then I added everything healthy I could to it. I added lion's mane, I added curcumin, I added Ceylon cinnamon, I added black pepper, I added all the healthy things, all the healthy spices I could squeeze into a chocolate. I had it in a delicious chocolate. I was making it at my parents' house, and they were some of my first investors. So my thought was, I'm going to get everyone to eat this chocolate, and then Alzheimer's is going to go away. It wasn't quite that simple. And, the chocolate probably was not enough to just stop Alzheimer's disease. I didn't claim that it did, but it would certainly be helpful. And so after doing that for about a year and losing money, I started, I think I did it for about 2 years. And I started publishing more educational content online. My mentor told me, if you really want to help people, make daily content. So I started making daily content on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And I got really fortunate. I made a viral video on TikTok. I went from 0 followers to 1,000. And I thought, wow, that was fast. And then a couple weeks later, I made another viral video. I went up to like 10,000. I thought, oh my gosh, this is really fun. So I started making as much content as I could, helping educate people on mostly free things they could do to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. I'll give you a couple because I know if you're watching, you're like, well, what can I do that's free? Number one, this is the most enjoyable. It's sleep. Sleep is tremendous for your brain. If you're not sleeping, you're really hurting your brain. And if you are sleeping, you're doing your brain a great service. Sleep is good for every cell of our body. Sleep is when we rewire our brain. It's when we wire up the new memories. So if you don't sleep, you're not going to have new memories. Sleep is actually when we cleanse the brain as well. There's a system in the brain that was discovered, I think in 2012 or 2013. It's called the glymphatic system. This is like the lymphatic system for your brain. As you sleep, your glial cells, I believe they shrink, and more cerebral spinal fluid flows into the brain and rinses out toxins and plaques and things like this. So if you don't sleep well, you have more plaque in your brain the next day. So actually not sleeping increases amyloid plaque, which is one of the hallmark signs of Alzheimer's disease. So sleep, one of the very best things you can do for your brain. I recently moved into a new place that's all mine, and I've outfitted the lights. So they're all kind of warmer lights. So they disrupt melatonin signals less. So the really bright lights from computers, white lights, the kind of the cold lights, the really high frequency, the blue lights, those are much more harmful to our natural cycles than the warmer lights or than candlelight. If you get candles, make sure you get beeswax. The paraffin candles, the standard candles, are actually made of basically petroleum, and they're not good to breathe in. So sleep is one thing you can do that's free. Number two, this one's really great, is hugs. Who likes hugs? Love hugs. Dr. Shivani, I know you like hugs. Hugs helps settle our nervous system. Stress is a major cause of disease. Most people will agree with that, and they notice this. I've noticed a lot of people get sick when they're stressed, or if they're chronically stressed, they have chronic ailments. And so hugging reduces stress, but also increases a hormone called oxytocin. This is called the love hormone or the bonding hormone, and that feels really good. Some doctors or some reports have recommended 7 30-second hugs a day. If you get 7 30-second hugs a day, you feel tremendous. Like it very much impacts your nervous system in a positive way if these are people that you have trust for. So hugs are another free thing you can do. And then lastly is exercise. And this is the most important because exercise affects so many things in our life. Exercise is medicine for your brain. It pumps fresh blood, more nutrients into your brain. It increases something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. That's a growth factor in the brain that facilitates the growth of new brain cells and new neural connections. Exercise also lowers inflammation, improves cardiovascular health, which is good for your heart, is good for your brain. Exercise has the virtuous cycle benefit, right? And so, for example, here's the non-virtuous cycle. Someone wakes up, they check their phone, and then they get kind of like a dopamine hit, but maybe they get a little nervous. Then they go outside and they smoke a cigarette. And then they come inside, they turn on the news, right? The negative thing is spiraling to unhealthy habits. Then they get stressed and they eat some sugar because they watched all the terrible things on the news. Yes, if you watch worldwide news, you can find terrible things. Something terrible is happening in the world right now, unfortunately. If you don't watch the news and you just, for example, if you were just to read your local newspaper, there's a lot fewer scarier things. If you just don't do that, if you just look up what you're interested in, how do I prevent Alzheimer's disease? Or how can I be healthier? Or how can I live a more fulfilling life and read articles about that? The world really is not that scary. So that's the non-virtuous cycle. The virtuous cycle is you wake up, you drink a glass of water, you get outside early morning and get sunshine. And this helps wake you up, and then you eat a healthy breakfast. And this cycles into good behaviors. Exercise does this very, very powerfully. When you exercise, you eat healthier food. You're less likely to eat junk food, and you sleep better, and you're more likely to exercise. And so it's this virtuous loop. And so if I were to suggest one thing to every human, if you want to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease, it would be exercise, because then you're going to eat better, you're going to have less stress, and you're going to sleep better. It improves pretty much every aspect of your health. So those are three things that you can do that have zero cost or almost no cost. Maybe you need to buy some running shoes to help reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. And all those are verified in the scientific literature.
And simple, free, easy. So many times people say to me, I sleep fine. And I always look at them like, fine is so relative. You could probably be sleeping much better until you measure your sleep. You don't have any eyes on, is it really 6 hours or 8 hours? Or what's the quality of that sleep? And then exercise. Exercise is medicine. And I can tell on the days I work out, I'm on fire. Like today I have worked out. I did one day. All cylinders are firing, even though there's a million things coming at me today, I can still handle all of it. And so that is a big encouragement. Wake up, move your body, get things going. So Robert, when it comes to your research and what you've been doing with Alzheimer's, I know you've been on this journey. You've done summits, you've been teaching about it. What have you been doing the last couple of years around Alzheimer's research? What have you seen has been developing in this world as new research or new knowledge? I know you work with lion's mane, I know you work with curcumin. What are some of the things that excite you?
So, well, let's start with curcumin, because I've been an advocate for curcumin basically since I switched to Alzheimer's prevention 5 years ago. As I started reading the articles are so powerful on curcumin. First of all, curcumin is extremely safe. So many prescription drugs are not super safe, certainly long-term. For example, this prescription drug that I'm about to share with you increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease by approximately 60%. These are drugs that block acetylcholine. These are often bladder control drugs. And so acetylcholine is an important neurotransmitter involved in memory. And so blocking acetylcholine reduces acetylcholine activity and impairs memory. A lot of people who take these drugs don't know that. Now, I'm not saying don't take these drugs, but if you're taking prescription drugs that you don't know and you're concerned about Alzheimer's disease, it's a really good idea to ask your pharmacist and or medical doctor, what does this drug do? Does this drug affect acetylcholine? How does it affect acetylcholine? Is there an alternative that does not affect acetylcholine, because I'm concerned about my memory? So I'm not a medical doctor, not giving you medical advice, but if you want to protect your brain, it's a good idea to know what drugs you're taking, what impact they have on the brain, and for example, do they affect acetylcholine? So curcumin, extremely safe, even in high doses. I'm not saying take high doses, but you can take high doses, very, very safe. The research on curcumin was so powerful, I put it in my chocolate. I said, how much curcumin can I jam into my chocolate and not have it taste like turmeric? And still have it taste good, so I give people the maximum benefit. And so curcumin does a couple of things for the brain, and this is one of the super supplements I put into my chocolate along with lion's mane and slaw and cinnamon. Curcumin improves memory. I think I read a meta-analysis that showed in 9 out of 10 studies it improved memory in animals. That's really powerful. So it improves memory. Curcumin reduces inflammation, which is one of the primary risk factors of Alzheimer's disease. Plus, inflammation is a major risk factor for disease overall. It's a risk factor for heart disease. It's a risk factor for stroke. It's a risk factor for diabetes. You name it. If it's a chronic disease, inflammation is likely associated with it. And then curcumin actually helps prevent the accumulation of plaque in the brain. This was so exciting when I read this. I went to my doctor. I said, "Doctor, look at this study. It shows that curcumin prevents the accumulation of plaque in the brain." And he kind of shrugged. He's like, "Oh, that's interesting." I'm thinking, you and I were talking off camera about this. I'm thinking, you might not be interested in this, but your patients are. If you're interested in curcumin and other supplements that help prevent the accumulation of plaque in the brain, please put a comment in the chat and let us know. It's so interesting to me when I'll share medical information about healthy activities or behaviors or supplements with medical doctors, and they shrug and they're not interested. I say, Joe, your patients are interested. They don't want prescription drugs. They want things that are not going to be harmful to them, that are really helpful to them. Curcumin is one of them, and it's very safe and very inexpensive, relatively speaking. And so I'm surprised that you're not interested. So curcumin is one of those things that I'm really interested in. And then you shared at the conference that we went to, you gave this great presentation. By the way, if you haven't seen a video of that, she's mobbed when she gets off the stage. So Dr. Shivani gets off the stage and just this crowd forms around her. And there's another speaker after her. And so I have to go to this crowd and say, excuse me. We couldn't continue the conference because it's just in the middle of the room. There was 20 or 30 people around. It's like, look, we got to take this outside because so many people are interested in all the healing benefits of curcumin. I think you said in the last year, there's been 500 clinical trials in humans. Over the last 2 years, there's over 500, which is so much research. It's amazing. So people are really interested in this. Side note, so if you're just joining us, please put your first name and where you're from in the chat on the Instagram Live. And then I've been talking about curcumin and turmeric. And some of you are asking, where do I get a great one? So here's what to look for in a great curcumin supplement. Number one, you want about 1,000 milligrams a day. And number two, you want to make sure it's paired with black pepper. That increases the absorption of it. Very important. I'll share with you a story about a study I read that was just aggravating to me that didn't have black pepper. And so Dr. Shivani, part of her business has been finding the very best curcumin and make it a super high quality supplement. This is what I take on a daily basis. My parents take this. And so if you're interested in a great curcumin supplement, it's called Turmeric Gold. And you can get it at the link in my bio, or go to robertlove.net and you can get it. And I think there's a discount on it. I think it's 15%. I think it's Love 15. And then it comes with 100% money back guarantee. If you don't love it, we're happy to refund your money. It's really great. I really like taking this. This is not something that I feel or that I notice, but based upon the data, I'm taking this every day. I take it 6 days a week. I take my supplement 6 days a week. So I'm taking this knowing this is good for me long-term. Some people notice it. Some people take it, they say, wow, I feel better. I don't notice a difference. I'm taking it betting on the science, betting that this is improving my health, reducing my inflammation and protecting my brain and helping reduce plaque in the brain. So that's what I take. And then if you're taking this, please comment in the chat. Let me know how you like this. But this is a really high quality supplement. It's 1,000 milligrams a day. It comes with black pepper. And Dr. Shivani is, she's playing the job of the entrepreneur and explorer. She's traveling to India, finding the very best products to put in the supplement. And so it's really high quality. So if you want a great curcumin, give that a try. So back to the story. So there was a study, Dr. Shivani, that was so aggravating to me, because it was this longitudinal study. It was like 6 months, and it might have cost $1 million. It was a bunch of old people who had Alzheimer's disease. They were 60 plus. And they gave them curcumin. And the headline of the study said, curcumin and Alzheimer's disease. I said, oh, I'm going to read this. This sounds interesting. I remember where I was when I read this, because I remember my nervous system was just activated reading this. So I read the study. It said there was no results of curcumin on Alzheimer's disease. I said, well, that doesn't sound right. That's contrary to a ton of data. So I read the study in detail. Guess what they did not have in their curcumin supplement? No black pepper. No black pepper. This decreased the absorption rate. For those of you watching this, decreased the absorption rate of curcumin by 300 to 3,000%, depending upon what study you look at. So a 3x to a 30x difference. That's massive. I mean, if I could change your finances by 3x or 30x, that's huge, right? So think about that difference with the absorption of a supplement. It makes a huge difference. So basically the study, either the researchers were incompetent or corrupt. They were paid by some institution to find no result with curcumin. I can get you no result with curcumin. I'll give you the wrong dose. I'll make it hard to absorb. I'll give you it to you with activated charcoal, right? Activated charcoal will absorb it, right? Or I won't test memory effectively, or won't give it to you long enough. Or I'll give it to you with alcohol, right? Here, take my curcumin with 2 shots of vodka, right? You probably won't notice a benefit in memory. So these researchers found a way to do bad research. Then they published it. And so be on the lookout for this. Curcumin in many, many studies shows the benefit to the brain. And if the study doesn't show that, read the study in detail, and also look at who the sponsors are. Because unfortunately, not all scientists, well, I guess they're not scientists, not all people doing science want the truth. They have an agenda on the science, which is really important. My agenda is to help as many people as I can. That's really why I'm in this, and that's I think that's why you're here too, Dr. Shivani, is to help as many people as we can with the science. I want to use the science to help as many people as possible. And if it's not helpful, I frankly don't want to do it.
And I think whenever you're a product creator, it's because you're so passionate about creating a solution. But when you turn back and look, like to me, I'm very much pushing for the legacy I leave behind. And that's going to be in the published science. Like the product is one cool solution in the here and now, so I want to give it to people. But I'm pushing for papers to be published in nutrients in different journals. I'm speaking to doctors every day, speaking at their conferences. I'm trying to educate everyone that there's more possibilities here. When we look at anti-inflammatories, there's just other possibilities without so many side effects. And so I always love talking to you because we're very much on the same wavelength. Let's solve the problem. Let's get in there. My next question is, when you have been doing all this work with Alzheimer's, I know that on the journey, you've gone into teaching summits, you've gone into teaching at different conferences and workshops and things like that. What has that experience been like for you? And then what are your next steps in the journey?
Yeah, so this is really fun. So I like speaking in person. I love speaking in person, and I love meeting people who are kind of followers of my channel. So if you're not familiar with my work, I have 2.1 million followers on TikTok, 1.3 on Instagram, 1.6 million on Facebook. I got recognized at Whole Foods yesterday. That was really fun. Thank goodness I was on good behavior. I was buying distilled water and lion's mane mushrooms, right? That's all that I had. I wasn't buying, vodka and M&Ms. I don't buy those things anymore. But so thankfully they caught me on good behavior, right? And so I love meeting people in person. It really makes this education that I'm doing online really fun and personal. And when I go do in-person events, I'll speak to a room of 20 or 30 or 100, and my TikTok videos get 10,000 to 100,000 views to 1 million views if it's a good video. So it's really funny. It's like I'm traveling to speak in person to take a pay cut, right? As far as people I reach, which is really funny to me. It's right. Okay, I'm here with you, 20 people. I'm so excited to be here. And it's very different than the online education. So I try to do both now. So when I do talk at conferences, I really try to film it. I try to film as much live stuff as I can because I want as many people to be exposed to it as possible. So I love doing live. I love the live interaction, and I'm really trying to leverage the social network, the social following that I've created to reach as many people as possible with the in-person education that I do. And so what's next is I hired some more team members that are going to help me edit my content so I can reach more people, which I'm really excited about. And then meanwhile, I'm setting up an in-person clinic with a dear friend of ours, Dr. Josh Hellman. You knew him before I knew him. You knew him years ago. I met him January of 2023, and we did our summit together. We are working with patients in person in South Florida, just around the Boca Raton area. And we're helping people who are concerned about Alzheimer's disease. And we're part of a new FDA clinical trial giving a new cutting-edge drug therapy that's extremely powerful. It's highly anti-inflammatory, very, very safe. The only negative side effects that we found so far is just like kind of swelling at the point of the IV. So people are getting great results in animals, great results in humans. And we're really excited to give this to people in person to be part of this FDA clinical trial. And when I first heard about this, I thought, yes, I want to use this, but I don't want to be someone who just prescribes drugs. I don't prescribe drugs. Dr. Josh does. I don't want to do that because that's not who I want to be in the world. And so we're combining it with lifestyle as well. So we're helping people get access to this FDA clinical trial drug that's showing tremendous results. And we're doing lifestyle coaching of exercise, foods, sleep, stress, all the things that are really, really powerful. By the way, if you're not doing the simple things of daily exercise, 20 to 30 minutes, ideally of aerobic exercise to get that blood pumping into the brain, if you're not getting good sleep, and if you're stressed, those are the things to work on first before exploring supplements. And I love supplements. And I have a supplement company. I sell supplements. But if you're not doing the exercise, the sleep, and the diet, you're missing out on these huge things. You got to start with those big behaviors and then supplements. And then if it's appropriate for you, then consider prescription drugs. That's the right flow, right? The free behaviors, the supplements, and then the more expensive prescription drugs. And then for those who come to our clinic, we're doing all of those things. We want to make sure that you're eating right, you're sleeping well, you're exercising. We can guide you on supplements and then see if this prescription drug is right for you, if you're fit for the trial. So that's what I'm really excited about. And this is really fulfilling to me because I had two grandparents who had dementia, And I saw how hard this was on my parents. Both of my parents got to experience what it's like to have a parent with dementia. And, I get to wake up and I say, wow, I get to work on the disease that basically killed my grandparents. And I'm so happy about that. I'm so happy that I get to work in an area that's going to be really helpful, that has deep personal meaning for me and meaning for millions of people who are suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's, or someone in their family does. And then this ring, my mother gave me this ring Christmas last year. This was her father's ring. So I get to, this is kind of like, it's got kind of like the family power on it. I'm really excited about this. So I put this on, I think about my grandfather, and I get to think, wow, I'm working to help stop the disease that pretty much ended his life. And that feels really good to me, to kind of have that, I'll say, that family support, that emotional backing that is in my life as I do my work. So that feels really fulfilling and gratifying. I'm so grateful I get to do work that I love, that helps people, and that has meaning and significance for me.
It's a really big deal. I think so much of why so many of us do the work we do is because of our own family history. My family growing up, every time I went to India, a grandparent would pass away in advanced stages of diabetes, again and again and again. And I kept seeing it. And I was like, how can this happen? Quadruple bypass, heart attack, stroke, Parkinson's, leg amputations. And all we did through my childhood was I watched my parents trying to revive and fix their parents. And I thought, gosh, are we just going to keep passing this down generationally? Is that what's coming for me and my sister and my family? And it's why I became obsessed with diabetes. It's why I've researched diabetes since middle school. And all I wanted to know was, how do you prevent diabetes? And what I learned was it's inflammation, it's stress, and it's obesity. So you better work on it. You better work on your health and exercise and diet. You better work on that stress. That's kind of the harder one. And then inflammation. And when I discovered turmeric, I was like, that's it. I figured out the way. So how hard is this? Take your turmeric, take your adaptogens, move your body. And now we know so much more about sleep and things like that. So when it comes to what you've been working on lately, I love that you're moving into this clinical trial arena, because I do think there's so much new science and research on what we can do to help people tremendously. I've seen so much new work in terms of devices, techniques, tools. I've seen doctors who are starting to specialize in Alzheimer's dementia with their patients, because the level of people who have this and the amount of people who are being diagnosed with Alzheimer's is growing so fast. And so I've heard it referred to as type 3 diabetes. So will you speak into that a little bit? Because it's very personal to me, the way that diabetes is rampant in this country, insulin resistance, metabolic disease. Will you connect the dots for people?
Absolutely. So I'll explain that, as well as I want to talk about what you mentioned about doctors specializing in Alzheimer's. I'm so excited about doctors specializing in this. I don't want to say that I'm frustrated, but it's fascinating to me. And I think it's harmful to the general public that you have general practitioners and or neurologists who, frankly, know very little or don't know squat about Alzheimer's disease. I've had people who are working with me individually, and they go to their neurologist and they say, oh, you can't prevent Alzheimer's. There's nothing you can do about it. That's factually not true. If a medical practitioner or a neurologist, heaven forbid, tells you there's nothing to do about Alzheimer's, fire them. So first of all, ask them, have they read the literature? Are you familiar with the current science? There's so much science of many things you can do. Research in the Journal of Neurology shows that the most powerful thing you can do to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's is exercise. Research from the Journal of Neurology. So if someone tells you there's nothing you can do about preventing Alzheimer's disease, they are not up to date on the science, and I recommend you work with someone else. If you are serious about preventing Alzheimer's, or if someone in your life has Alzheimer's and you want to stop the progression, you need to work with someone who knows the current science. And so please don't let anyone tell you there's nothing you can do about Alzheimer's. That's the old science. That's what my parents thought when my grandfather had Alzheimer's disease in 1986. This is 2024. There's tons of science of what you can do. So please find a doctor if you're going to work with a doctor who is familiar with the current science. Don't let people tell you there's nothing you can do, because that's simply not true. And many doctors will say the same thing for type 2 diabetes. If a patient comes into the doctor's office with type 2 diabetes, the doctor says, here's a drug. You're going to take this for the rest of your life. Well, oftentimes people are willing to make changes to not have type 2 diabetes. And doctors, they may not know, but they're also not advocating for it. Listen, if you change your diet, you change your lifestyle, if you start exercising more, and if you get more sleep, you could recover some of your insulin. You could become more insulin sensitive. Your insulin could start working well, and you might not need to take these drugs, and you'll be healthier, and you'll lose weight. Many doctors aren't saying that. Now, I'm not in all the offices, so I don't know what's being said, but in talking to other people who have diabetes, this is what I'm hearing, is that they're basically prescribed a drug without being offered what to do. Another example is hypothyroidism. A lot of people with hypothyroidism in the United States can be helped by removing fluoride from their diet. You got to drink basically distilled water or reverse osmosis water, and you can't drink water or beverages out when you go in public. You got to bring your own drinks. And if you're willing to do that, you can help recover function of your thyroid. Some doctors know this, but almost none of them are telling their patients. And so if you have a chronic disease, I would like to empower you, to empower yourself to find what you can do to help recover that function, because oftentimes medical doctors won't tell you. And so please do your own research, and please take your health. You are the CEO of your own health. And so do your research and make the decisions that are good for your long-term health. And oftentimes that is not as simple as taking a prescribed drug. It's often making lifestyle changes of diet, exercise, sleep, stress, and oftentimes some other things. So type 2 diabetes. Why is Alzheimer's disease called type 3 diabetes? So type 2 diabetes is a lack of function of insulin. Your insulin isn't working. Basically, you've become insensitive to insulin, likely from diet. And so when we eat a diet that's high in refined sugar, that spikes our insulin, spikes our blood glucose levels, and this often causes weight gain and inflammation. And these spiking of insulin and glucose, it starts to dull our insulin response. And eventually, our cells become resistant to the insulin response. Our pancreas will secrete insulin when we eat food. And our cells say, no, we're not. Basically, insulin causes the cells to uptake sugar. It's very important. And our cells will say, no, we don't want any more sugar, or they ignore the response, or whatever. So they become insensitive to the insulin response. And so this is a problem, because your body must regulate blood sugar. Underline must. If your blood sugar is chronically high, you can get organ failure and death. Chronically high levels of sugar lead to organ failure and death. This is a huge, huge deal. And so this is why insulin resistance is a big problem. And so if someone has type 2 diabetes, they're insulin resistant, and that means they're also not using energy effectively. What's the biggest energy consumer in the body? Dr. Shivani, what's the biggest energy consumer in the body? The brain. Yeah, it's about a third of our energy consumption, 25 to 30% of our oxygen and our energy. So if your body's not using energy effectively, your brain's not using energy effectively. Have you ever had brain fog?
Yes.
Yeah. And what's that like?
It's horrible. And I can tell when I'm getting dehydrated. My brain just starts turning down to where it's shut down. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. And so imagine if your brain is chronically deprived of energy. This can happen if people have type 2 diabetes and it's not being managed effectively. Their body's not using energy effectively. Their brain's not using energy effectively. That means it's not performing well, which could be the beginning of brain fog, which could become over time a subjective cognitive impairment, then mild cognitive impairment, and then potentially dementia. So that's one link. Another link is inflammation, which we talked about. Curcumin, great at reducing inflammation. Exercise is good at reducing inflammation. Sleep is very important. Type 2 diabetes is associated with an increased level of inflammation. And so if your inflammation is higher, that increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease as well. So those are two very straightforward ways that type 2 diabetes increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease. One, lack of energy to the brain. Number two, increased inflammation. And I think the data show type 2 diabetes increases the risk of Alzheimer's by at least 30%. Potentially 60%. I don't know the exact number. It's substantial. It's one of the major causes. So let's just go over some of the major causes of Alzheimer's while we're talking about it. So number one is inflammation. Research from the Framingham study in Framingham, Massachusetts, they tracked people for decades. They found that your levels of inflammation at age 40 predict your risk of Alzheimer's at age 70. So Yep.
Those are quite late.
Yes. Yes. And so if you're listening to this, it's a good idea to, work on your inflammation today. If you want to sleep on it, start tomorrow. But we want to start reducing that immediately because that impacts your health 30 years from now. That's what the data show. So inflammation. Another one is insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. Another one is lack of nutrients to the brain. So if you're deficient in acetylcholine, we talked about acetylcholine earlier. If you're deficient in magnesium, for example, research shows in dissection studies, brains of Alzheimer's patients are more likely to have a deficiency in magnesium. The FDA says approximately 7 out of 10 Americans are not eating enough magnesium-rich foods. So nutrients, is your brain getting the nutrients it needs to be effective? Healthy fatty fish, or omega-3 fatty acids. Your brain outside of water is made primarily of fat. And if you're not consuming enough healthy fats, your brain is lacking the resource it needs to repair and maintain itself. So nutrients, traumatic brain injury, that's another major cause. And so just the hitting of the head, the younger we are when we have traumatic brain injury, the easier it is to heal. After age 25, it becomes harder. The brain becomes a lot less plastic. And so traumatic brain injury is a major risk factor. If you're over age 55, certainly if you're over age 65, one of your primary jobs is to not get injured. It's to not fall. I was talking to my parents and they were, they wanted to reach up high on a shelf. And my mother wants to get on a stool. I said, Mother, you're not getting on a stool to reach up for something here. She's like, oh, I do it all the time. I said, no more. My mother's 71. I said, you're not getting on a stool because the chances of you falling are not insignificant. And the cost of you falling is massive. And whatever's up there on that shelf, we're going to put it down somewhere or we're going to throw it away because it's not worth it. Whatever it is, it can't possibly be worth the risk of you getting on a stair ladder and reaching up high over your head. It's not possibly worth it. So reduce your risk of falls. Falls are really hard to recover from, especially hip fractures. And then traumatic brain injury, we want to avoid those as well. So those are just, and then there's another major cause are chronic infections, chronic Lyme disease, brain parasites, these things, infections, those can also hurt the brain as well. So and then heavy metals and mold. This is another category of things that impact the brain. And so I want to cite the work of Dr. Dale Bredesen, a medical doctor from UCLA. I actually got to interview him. He's a personal hero of mine. He basically cracked the code of Alzheimer's disease, and he figured out it's not just one thing. They used to think it was all genetics. Genetics play a part, but that's not the whole story. He figured out it's these different categories, these 6 different risk factors, these 6 major causes of Alzheimer's disease. And he's been able to basically help people stop the progression and even recover their memory by addressing all 6 of those, by helping with their diet, by helping with their inflammation, by making sure they had enough nutrients for the brain, by helping traumatic brain injury recovery, getting rid of mold and heavy metals from the brain and so forth. So it's important to understand that Alzheimer's disease is the most complex disease in the most complex organ of the body, the brain. There's not one simple answer. Yes, type 3 diabetes. Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes. That is a major risk factor. It is not the only risk factor. It's multiple different things. It's inflammation, traumatic brain injury, lack of nutrients, brain parasites, heavy metals, and so forth.
And some people say, as you were speaking about that, I thought some people say Alzheimer's is one of the worst. I know there are so many that are horrible, cancer and all these are horrible. But I've heard that Alzheimer's is almost worse because it's your loved one right in front of you, forgetting you even exist, forgetting everything about your life. And I've seen a physician who got acute Alzheimer's, is what they called it. But it onset very quickly is what they realized. And it's been horrific to watch that happen to people and their families. You work so hard your whole life to build this incredible life for your kids and everyone, and then all of a sudden you forget all of it. And so I'm really glad that you're on the forefront of pushing this awareness and pushing this knowledge and sharing with people about it, because you make it very bite-sized, and you make it doable. It's just these 6 things. And as long as we invest some time into each, we don't have to be perfect. But as long as we're investing the time and effort into each, I know that we can significantly reduce our chance of getting these things, including brain health issues that you're talking about, dementia, Alzheimer's. So what do you see coming next? Do you see, what would you envision for the world if you could paint a picture for the world 50 years from now?
So I love what you said. I really hope that my biggest contribution is to people who prevent Alzheimer's disease with those behaviors, right? I hope the millions of people who subscribe to my channel, I hope they all are doing the exercise and the sleep and eating a healthy diet and they never get Alzheimer's. I really hope that's my main contribution, is helping people not get this. And they can, if they just, if they do these right things and behave themselves and not drink too much alcohol. I know alcohol is fun. I drank way too much in college and in grad school. And frankly, really fortunate I didn't hurt myself during those times. But reduce the sugar and the alcohol and increase the broccoli and the blueberries and the tennis. Make sure you're playing tennis. Dr. Shivani, do you play tennis?
Yeah.
So the research shows, I might not have these numbers exactly right. There was a study on sports and who lived longer. So those who jogged daily, they had it like they lived 1 or 2 years longer. I thought that's terrible. I was jogging in the morning. I'm like, I'm not going to jog every morning for 30 minutes for 1 or 2 years at the end. That's not worth it. So stop that. Bicycling and swimming were 2 to 3 years. Tennis was 7. If you play tennis regularly, that increases the length of your life by 7 years. So why, on average, why is this? This was a study out of Scandinavia, and it might have been Finland. What they found was that tennis does so many different things. Number one, it's aerobic. Number two, it's hand-eye coordination, right? That's really good for the brain. So ping pong would also be good. Pickleball is great. Who likes pickleball? Love pickleball. So fun.
That is obsession. I can't find a person who's not obsessed. So I'm not playing it yet, just because I don't have time for new obsession.
It's so fun. It's great. And so hand-eye coordination. Then it's fun, so it requires less willpower. Right. So, for example, broccoli is a great thing to eat. If you hate broccoli, don't eat it. Eat cauliflower. If you don't like that, try Brussels sprouts. If you don't like that, do arugula. Find some cruciferous vegetable. But if you absolutely hate tennis, don't play tennis. Try squash. Find exercise that's enjoyable to you. So tennis is enjoyable, which means it takes less willpower, which means we have more willpower to eat the broccoli, to not drink alcohol, right? To quit smoking, whatever it is, right? So it saves our willpower, and we're more likely to do it because it's fun and it's social. Human beings are social creatures. This is why I can say this because we're doing the interview here. It's uncensored. I was so unhappy with the recommendations during the pandemic to stay inside and stay isolated. Being isolated is very dangerous for health. Research Dr. Daniel Goleman shared in his book, Social Intelligence, shared that being lonely is more dangerous for your health than smoking cigarettes. That's how bad loneliness is. And the message a lot of us got encouraged us to stay alone and to be lonely, which is awful for our health. And so I was also very displeased. I'd go to a grocery store and there was sugar at the checkout aisle. There was sugar like as an impulse buy as I'm checking out. I thought, this is a pandemic. We know that sugar is bad for our immune system and you're selling it to us as we're leaving. This is not responsible behavior by a company during a time of a health crisis. You should be putting put the broccoli and the mushrooms and the blueberries here. This is not the time to be selling us sugars we're checking out. So I was very unimpressed with the mainstream message of stay inside, stay isolated, but not change our diet, not to exercise, not to hug people you love, and so forth. So tennis also is a social thing. So it's really great in that aspect of it. So it hits all those things. Hand-eye coordination, it's fun, it's aerobic, and we're socializing. So in the next 50 years, my hope is that Alzheimer's is basically non-existent. Frankly, it could be done in 10 if all the information got out and then people did the right thing. I believe starting for those age 50 and below, if everyone knew what I knew or what's in Dr. Dale Bredesen's books and did the right thing and basically did the diet and the exercise and reduced their drinking, stop smoking, and reduce their stress, I think Alzheimer's would go down dramatically, if not basically go away. I think in 10 years, we could have clinics where someone comes in and says, I have Alzheimer's. They say, okay, great. We know exactly what to do. Do this, 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 and this, and you're fine. I think that's in 10 years. The science will definitely be there for someone to go into a clinic with Alzheimer's and say, I have Alzheimer's. Great. We're going to take your blood. We're going to take your measurements. Okay. Take these 3 things. and we want you, these are the exercises to do, and we're going to monitor your sleep, and who are you living with, who's your husband, who's your wife, who are your children. Okay, great. We want you getting this amount of hugs. We want you going on walks with them. We want you learning new things. So I think 10 years, Alzheimer's could definitely, Dr. Dale Bredesen says Alzheimer's is optional. I like that phrase. You don't need to get it. It is not destiny. Certainly it's not genetic destiny. So frankly, it's optional now. If you're willing to do the exercise and eat the food, those are the two hardest things for most people. Alzheimer's is optional now if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to read the science, and then do what's necessary for you to help protect your brain. Because some people have mold exposure they need to take care of. Some people have heavy metals. Some people it's more type 2 diabetes. So monitoring and doing what's effective for them. So that's 10 years. 50 years, goodness gracious, who knows? I mean, I'd like to think that AI and robotics are going to advance to the point where nobody needs to work, where we can all just live as humans and live a life that we like, and there's an abundance of resources and we're not polluting. And then people who want to be artists can be artists. People who want to spend their time, in virtual reality can do that. And then crazy people like you and me can still contribute to the scientific literature. I mean, I don't see myself retiring as long as I can think. I get antsy if I sit for too long. I want to do stuff and I want to be productive. And so hopefully I can find some way to be productive in 50 years that's making an impact in the world. But my guess is either we're all going to be very unhealthy in 50 years. Most of us will be really unhealthy and just like living inside some virtual thing like Ready Player One, or we're all super duper healthy with a ton of abundant resources. We get organic food delivered to our home for free with drones, and it's all paid for through public funds, and it's grown in a nearby greenhouse that's powered with solar energy as some sort of renewable energy. So I think that's what's more likely, is that a ton of resources, a lot of healthy people. The AI is really going to help with the science. We're going to have, a doctor. We're going to have apps linked to our phone that's monitoring our health, and the AI doctor is going to be way better than a human doctor. And so we're going to get tremendous medical information from AI algorithms, and I think we're going to be extremely healthy for those who want it, and those who don't are going to live however they live. But the possibility for optimal health and an abundance of resources, I think, is extremely likely in the future, and that's what I'm hoping and praying for. So that we don't need to stress about work. We can just do our human thing and enjoy life.
I love that vision. We're just going to live in this utopic, non-disease, abundant, healthy lifestyle where we all get to hang and live healthy and vibrant. That sounds great.
And then somewhere like conflict needs to be manufactured, because if there's no conflict, people are like bored, and then they break stuff, right? So if you read the Elon Musk book, which I highly recommend, or listen to it, it's a great audiobook. Everything was going really, really well for him, and then he just gets impulsive and buys Twitter. And then he had a new problem to solve. So a lot of people like problems to solve. So we'll have to find a way of manufacturing small problems in our lives so there's something to manage. Because if everything's taken care of us, we actually are quite uncomfortable with that. So we'll have to find some way to manufacture like small problems so we have like something to deal with while our electricity and our food are free.
We're human beings. I'm sure we'll find a way. Right? Well, Robert, I loved talking to you today. I feel like I could talk to you forever. There's so much always when we talk, because there's curcumin, there's all the solutions around Alzheimer's, there's reversing Alzheimer's. I love having these conversations with how do we reverse diseases? What are the steps? What are the lifestyle factors? What can we all do? Walking outside is free, sleeping better, just reprioritize your day. Push everything into early and sleep on time. There's so many ways that we can support our health, reverse these health struggles that we're suffering with. So, Robert, share with my audience where everyone can find you.
So I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search Robert Love. I'm the first Robert Love that comes up. My handle is Robert W.B. Love. Those are my two middle names, Robert W.B. Love. But I'm available on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And I have a bunch of free resources at robertlove.net. So I have free reports, and I think there's probably a video training series on there. robertlove.net. You can also, if you're interested in my supplements, you can go that there. But my free information and then my supplements are all available at robertlove.net if you want to learn more there. And then if you're committed to preventing Alzheimer's and living a really healthy life, just subscribe to one of my channels and see if it's helpful to you. And all that's free content. My sincere hope is that I make a video, I do some research and I make a video that's really helpful to you. And that just maybe gets you eating broccoli one more time a week, or get you eating mushrooms twice a week. Research from Singapore shows that those who eat mushrooms 3 times a week have a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. So find a way to eat mushrooms 3 times a week. Like if you can just do that, I'm so grateful and delighted when people make just that one change from watching one of my videos that really impacts their health. And if you can do one thing, you can do 2. And if you do 2, you do 3. If you do 3 things that improve your health, you are such a healthier person. If you're doing one food and your regular exercise or you're improving your sleep, you are such a healthier person. And so I hope that the research that I do and the content I create is helpful in helping you make some of those small changes in your life that lead to really big health improvements in your life.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for joining me over here.
It's been delightful. Thank you so much, Dr. Shivani. It's such a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.